Guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Thin the Herd. I'm your host, Alex Getlin. If you've never seen this or heard this before, this is my solo podcast. Maybe you've heard my other podcast, House Rules. I do every Monday with my fiance, Rachel LaForce. But yeah, this is my podcast. I do just me. At least once a week, sometimes a few times a week, where I just do a little bit of commentary, look at the news, talk about what's going on in the world, and try and make sense of all the chaos going on. So let's jump into it. But before I get into that, before I jump into the stuff I wanted to talk about today, I do want to let me see. I'm setting up my computer here. This is a one-man show at Thin the Herd live. But yeah, real quick. Okay, so yeah, this is the podcast I do. I'm going to do it at least once a week. I did this last Monday. I'm going to try and do it a few times a week if I can. I think today's Tuesday. What's today? The 21st, I think. Let me check my phone here. Yeah, Tuesday, July 21st. I think I'm going to do this ideally 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah, do a little bit of news headlines, a little bit of commentary, kind of talk about what's going on here. I am in Los Angeles right now. You know, a little while ago I was in Atlanta for a bit of COVID, and I'm here for the foreseeable future. And yeah, so what I want to talk about today. Well, the first thing I want to do, I want to jump into this article because I think we could all, I think if the U.S. started to do more of this, we'd be way better off. So this is from Bloomberg. This says, Japan starts paying firms to cut reliance on Chinese factories. Japan's government will start subsidizing some companies to invest in factories in Japan and in Southeast Asia as part of efforts to reduce reliance on manufacturing in China. The government will pay a total of 70 billion yen, which the conversion from yen to dollars is pretty much almost the same. So I think it's something around a little bit shy of like $66 billion that it would be to convert it. Anyway, the government will pay a total of 70 billion yen in this round. The payments come from 243.5 billion yen that the government earmarked in April to reduce the reliance on Chinese supply chains. Okay, so let me jump into what I wanted to get in, or how this is relevant. I think we are in a very interesting time. I mean, we keep saying that everyone's like, oh, in these unforeseen times, in this crazy time. But it does feel a lot of what's happened now that we've like really gotten into, we're in COVID. This is what's going on. This is our new reality, as we like to say. There's a lot going on in the world. Let me talk about the U.S. for a second. There's a lot going on in the country, We have this, election coming up, obviously, that everyone can't stop talking about, and I'll get into more of that in a second. And we've seen a lot of flaws in our country. We've seen a lot of flaws in our system. And one of the biggest ones I've seen that I think is a huge issue is that we still manufacture so many things, so many like essential things that we need to just survive. We manufacture them overseas. And I feel like one of the benefits, and I use this, I saw this headline in Bloomberg about what Japan is doing. It's kind of like, hopefully we could maybe use this as an opportunity to, wake up and realize what we could do here in the States. Japan's realized like, hey, it's not smart to keep manufacturing so many of our goods in a foreign country that we need day to day. And, it's interesting to me, we've seen just how much of our stuff is made in China, in Taiwan, in India. And it's like we have so many of these goods, so many of these things that are just like essential things that we need, that we manufacture overseas. And, one of the sides of, one of the elements of all of this COVID stuff that we've seen is, how, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to use the word frail, but how vulnerable is probably a better word. How vulnerable our country is if we ever have an emergency like we saw with the, ventilator shortage and things like that. And it's interesting because we also simultaneously, it's like our economy is about to go over a cliff. We know this is coming. It's already happening, but we know that, we're about to have serious, serious problems here in the U.S. with the job shortage, with people's jobs disappearing. And it's interesting. It's just, I'm looking at this example from Japan. It's like we could do so many things for our, country's stability if we brought more of those jobs back here to the U.S. And, I don't know. It just, it seems like it's something that's so obvious, so important that we're not doing. And it's interesting. I want to divert. I guess I'll jump into a little bit of what I see in the political realm now. But it's interesting how we have so much focus on what's happening now. What feels like is we've gotten so binary in our country. We've gotten so binary in what people like either have to believe, what they're supposed to believe. We've lost all room for nuance, and we've sort of just only started to focus on this like hyper obsession with your political allegiance. I don't think most people align themselves left or right. I don't think most Americans really like day to day have decided that like their political ideology is so much a part of their identity that like that's the thing that they need to hyper focus on to get through the day. You know what I mean? Like I think most people are still mostly independent, but we've gotten to this point now where we don't really have room for nuance. Like I myself, I guess to clarify, I don't align left or right. I consider myself very independent. Really with every issue, I look at it and I say, all right, what's the issue? How do I feel about it morally? What are my like kind of ethical and moral views on it? And then what feels practical, right? Now we have this big discussion about defunding the police, which I'm not going to go into the nuances of it. I feel like there's been a lot of stuff talked about. People who are much more well-read on what needs to happen with that. I'm just using an example here, right? Most people, I think, don't have the energy or the time to really, myself included for a lot of things, right? To look at the nuances of like when an issue is being presented, right? Like defund the police. What does that actually mean? How could it practically work? It's just, there's just so much going on. You kind of take the snippets of the headlines, figure out, I don't know, maybe I agree with this, maybe I don't. I don't know how to feel. But I feel like with what happens a lot with these things is, there's sort of the way you feel about it, like ethically, and the way you feel about it practically, So with defunding the police, I simply mean that there's, the ethical arguments you feel about. There are obviously problems within like certain things that the police do, and what like you emotionally feel should happen, and then you try to think about like, okay, but like on a practical level, how do we fix this problem? On a practical level, like what can we do day to day to maybe tackle some of these issues? And those two things don't always align, is what I'm trying to say. Those two things don't always match up. And what I'm getting at here, and I'm going to get back to my main point I was trying to make earlier, is that I feel like for me, what I do is I try to look at an issue because I don't really align with any political party. I'm very liberal on some stuff. I'm very conservative on other things. That's not true. I'm kind of conservative on a few things, but I'm pretty independent. But I think for what more people need to try and do, I would recommend, is take an issue that you have strong feelings about, and then look at it from how you feel like it aligns with whatever sort of morality code you have. And then also look at like what might seem practical, on a big scale of implementation in our country. And I don't think we've allowed people to do that anymore. It's weird. It's, I was thinking about this morning. By the way, I'm in a Third Wheel podcast studio. I'll shout out those guys. I work here part-time, and I come in here to do my own podcast. I was riding my bike here, ride my bike a lot now through LA. It's kind of a way to, stay active, stay fit during, all the gym shutdowns. Getting on a tangent. My point is, I was thinking about this morning on my bike ride. I really feel like mainstream media and social media has done more damage to the American morale than any real like group of people or politician has done. We've gotten into this point where we have this like weird hyper obsession on like fear porn and outrage porn. And I use the word porn as not actual pornography. We're just saying that like, media that we put out there that's like, look at this terrible thing that happened. And we get in these weird cycles where, most of my friends who are either leaning towards voting for Biden or voting for Trump, they don't actually, I don't have a lot of friends that are voting for Trump, at least that they're not admitting it. I have a good amount of friends who I guess are admitting or sharing. I don't know. I don't use the word admit. That feels strange, but they're at least sharing that they're planning to vote for Biden, this fall. And a lot of them, the reason they're doing it, it's only because they're so afraid of the repercussions of voting the wrong way. And I don't really think personally, what I honestly feel is that no matter who gets it, nothing's going to change. Everything will basically stay the same. There's really the only thing I've thought about, I've really wrestled over this because I do think from a Trump obviously is a worse. He incites more anger from people than I think Biden does, just purely from a speaking point, from like a public persona standpoint, But I don't think anything will effectively change depending on who stays in office between the two. I suppose the only difference I see is that Trump seems kind of like a wild dog that can't be contained, and Biden just seems like a sock puppet that, he clearly answers to people above him, and we don't really know who those folks are. And I've seen a lot of people try to like mull over like, oh, like what do I want to, myself included, like who do I want to vote for? Like what can I pick like one thing? Can I pick like one issue, one thing that I can stand behind firmly? Like that's why it's a better option. And by the way, before I even get into what I'm trying to say here, I know a lot of people who listen to me and say like, or have tuned in or talked to me. They're like, obviously, their attitude is obviously you should vote for Biden because Trump is so bad. And I don't really have a strong point on either. I think both of them are terrible, and I could see reasons to vote for both or vote for neither. But I understand people saying things like, oh, well, we got to focus on who, the Supreme Court nominee is going to be, or, certain issues that they might stand behind. But really, truly, when you really think about it, man, when you really use your logical thinking, nothing is going to change between the two of them. We all know that. And what I really feel strongly about, what I want to jump into right now, I know I've been kind of rambling a bit, which I do from time to time on this podcast, is I am most likely going to vote third party. I'm probably going to vote libertarian, and I don't identify necessarily as libertarian, and I don't even necessarily really have a lot of like libertarian views or feel strongly about that party. But I really think with everything going on now in our country, with so much chaos and turmoil and things being we're like in this massive like refresh stage. We're rethinking how we do everything, how we do schooling, right? How we go to social events, how we like all of like our healthcare system. There's so many systems we have in our country. We've seen this is so broken. It took COVID and this massive economic downfall and exposing elements of like police corruption for people to really understand like this is such a problem. It has to be changed immediately. We can't wait anymore. And I think that's good. I mean, I think ultimately what's going to come from it is good. And I really want to encourage people to consider the option of voting third party. There aren't a lot of them right now. I know that like there's the Green Party, there's a Libertarian Party. I hope there are more in the future. But what I really want people to understand is when, I hear a lot of my friends when I've talked about how I'm probably going to vote Libertarian this fall, and not even because I love that party so much, or I think that I think her name's Jo Jorgensen, I believe is how you pronounce her name, the candidate running for president there. People say, oh, it's too important. This election is too important. You got to do it later. They're usually my friends who are leaning towards Biden, which is fine. I understand your reasons. And they would say, it's too important, this election. It's too important. Do it later. And I just want to, I really want whoever's listening, whether it's like friends of mine, family, random people that stumbled upon this. Shout out to my friend Lauren for watching on Facebook. Thank you, Lauren. By the way, if you're just listening to the pre-recorded version later, I stream this live on Facebook and on my production company's site, Skewed Orbit. You can go to those pages and on YouTube. But anyway, my point is, what I was trying to get at here is mainstream media and all of the political forces involved, whether it's left-wing, right-wing, the DNC, the GOP, they will always make you believe that this election is too important to vote third party. There will never, ever, ever be a time that they ever allow you to believe that it's okay to vote third party. And I understand that a lot of people can't stand Trump. And a lot of people think Biden is going to basically cause the end of civilization, that he's like the worst thing that's ever happened to what we want to do here in the U.S. And I understand hatred for both. I understand feeling that, I have a lot of friends that are very progressive and liberal. I have a lot of friends that are very conservative. And I understand why different people feel like they have to vote left or right. But I really, really feel strongly that, like, what's happening now, this is the perfect time. This is the absolute perfect time that we as the American public need to stand up and say, no, we are sick of this binary system. I want to see third, fourth, and fifth party candidates popping up. Now, I know that November is so close. It might not end up happening this election. It's probably, there probably won't be a lot of that we see coming up this election cycle. But I really think we owe it to ourselves. If you try to be an informed person, if you care about the future of this country, which I think a lot of us do. I know it's hard to be informed because there's so much going on and so much of the news is garbage because it's clearly just, information designed to incense you and make you feel outraged and scared. But just know that, like, this system that we live in, it is absolutely set up to make you feel like you only have two options. And if you vote against the safer bet, right? I know a lot of my friends who are very progressive, they're like, we got to vote for Biden. It's just too risky. Trump is so awful. And I'm not going to defend Trump at all. I don't like Trump. I don't think he's a good leader. He's a terrible speaker. But if you're going to vote and vice versa, I have a couple friends who are super conservative who think that, Biden is going to usher in this new wave of, like, hyper left things that are bad for the country. I see why both of you guys feel this way. But regardless of how you vote, I really encourage everybody to just stop and recognize, if you can, and listen, I have my own biases and everything too. This whole system is designed to make you feel like you're not able, it's always going to be too risky to vote third party. And I say, why not now? Why not? Everything is in chaos. We know our system is totally broken. No one has offered any real practical solutions of how they're going to fix anything. It's either going to be more of the same with Trump or nonsense with Biden. And I know that, like, RGB, she's probably not going to make it through, not to be so grim, but, it's very likely that the next president will have to replace at least one Supreme Court judge. I don't take that lightly. I understand, depending on how you feel politically or ideologically. That is a huge, huge factor for you. And I get that. I understand that. I simply am highlighting, I'm simply trying to say here that they are playing us. The DNC and the GOP, those organizations are so mega, mega powerful. They have an iron grip on our entire political system. I think they've been around. I looked this up recently. I think they've been around since like the 1850s. So over 100, and let's round up. Let's say it's over 170 years. We have been in a binary two-party system. And it's so interesting that, like, we really haven't gotten to a point here where we've decided, like, this is ridiculous. This is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. I think it was Colin Quinn on, he had that, if you have Netflix, I highly encourage everybody to watch this. And it's his most recent special called Red State, Blue State. And he had a great joke in there. It was something to the effect of, America's broken because we have like 54 different genders and 2 political parties. And I think, it's just so insane to feel like we have a country with 350 million people, roughly. And we're supposed to settle on 2 parties that are going to somehow address the needs of all of us. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And the thing is, too, like, I understand, and I just keep referencing libertarians simply because at the moment, as far as I understand, they're the only real, like, major third party. And when I say major, I say that very loosely, very, I don't mean like they're actually a major party. But I do agree with a lot of their ideals from what I understand. I'm still educating myself about it. But, the other thing that I've read about that seems to make a lot of sense is another reason why the DNC and the GOP are so powerful. It's not simply because they, it's not that they get all the votes and that, what am I trying to say here? I want to rephrase it so this makes sense. Because so few people are willing to vote third party, they don't have to, and if any third party I'm saying here, it could be the Green Party, the Tea Party, even though I don't really agree with almost anything they believe in, but I'm just showing as an option, the Libertarian Party. If those third parties were able to get major portions of the voter base, then the major left and right wing political organizations would have to pay more attention to the people who vote in that base. Meaning, like, if you have an issue that is really important to you, let's say you have something that's so important to you, but it's pretty much being ignored by, Republicans and Democrats. It's just not, for whatever reason. I feel like every election cycle we boil it down to like one or two things that we're actually voting on, and I'll get to that more in a second. As you can see, like I've said before, I start with some news and I kind of go on a bit of a stream of consciousness thing, bring it back to some news. But anyway, my point is here, if more people were willing to put their vote into a third party that aligned with the views they actually care about, the major political organizations would have to start paying attention to those concerns. If you really want education reform, if that is your key issue because our school system is so incredibly broken and it does nothing but a disservice to people in this country, especially the poorest people in this country. I know this sounds insane, but why not form a third political party that makes that the key issue and dump all of your votes, take everybody that you can get behind it and vote for that, because eventually those parties will start to cater to those voices when they realize, like, that's all it is. That is all that happens, is that, these major political institutions look at, they have their core base that's never going to leave them. And then they look at the people that are on the fringe and they're like, okay, what is the thing that we have to double down on to make people on like kind of the outskirts of our party feel like it's us or their life is going to fall into shambles. And that's what's happening now. The GOP is convincing you that if Biden becomes president, all of Western civilization is going to fall apart because it's going to start the new era of communism, and we're going to have just mobs of, social justice, Antifa people marching through your streets. And then the DNC obviously is convincing you that, like, if Trump wins again, that it's going to be like, his own version of Nazi Germany. Obviously, both of those are completely absurd. It's preposterous. But they have to keep selling you on this narrative to make you think that it's too risky to go outside the lines. To me, it's like so obvious to me what's happening is that they're both so entrenched on, like, just, keeping America by the balls, basically, and being like, remember, if you want to keep your way of life, you got to vote for us, or, if you don't want things to get worse. Anyway, I've gone on that long enough. I think you guys get what I'm saying here. I hope that made sense. I think a couple of you guys agree with me here. But again, I'm really going to keep talking. I'm taking the time that I have. I know there's only so much time we can spend day to day trying to, like, educate ourselves and learn more, but I'm really, like, a big thing for me now between now and November, because the options we have are so terrible, as I'm really trying to educate myself more about, like, what I can do, or what all of us can do to give ourselves more. We live in a democracy. Like, we have all the power here. We as voters truly have the power to decide who represents us. And we keep falling into this pattern of, like, well, it's just, it's like left or right, that's it. And I really encourage all of us, myself included, start learning more about, like, what could be third-party options. And I know, like, with November coming up, it might be too late for this election cycle. But let's take this next 4-year cycle and really think about, like, how can we use third-party options to our advantage? How can we stop just saying, all right, well, if this is what the Republicans or Democrats have decided that this is what we care about, that's what we care about. No, screw that, man. Figure out what you care about, what issues are important to you. Like, for me, a big thing I really care a lot about is having a not broken school system for our country. Probably because I'm going to be a parent, hopefully, in a few years. And figure out some kind of system to rally around that. Okay, so anyway, so my point was with pulling up this thing that I see what Japan is doing is what Japan is basically doing is they are using a lot of their resources, their tax base, from what I understand, to pay companies to bring those jobs home. We got to do more of that here. It's so crazy to me. And that's one of the dumbest things I remember when like Trump was all about like America first, America first. Like that part I actually was a fan of. I'm a big actually fan of putting America first in terms of like we got to focus on our country's needs and then worry about the rest of the world. But he had this whole like America first message and then didn't bring anything back. And that's, we got to do more of that. I think we're really starting to realize, and I talked about this last episode, we're learning more about how much money we dump into our military, which, that's a whole separate episode about the military industrial complex. But I really think strongly, I really feel strongly, we have to start now more than ever incentivizing companies to bring jobs, manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Now, I know that automation is going to take away a lot of, the jobs that used to exist. But our economy, we're like a high-speed train barreling towards a cliff. We've already lost incredibly large segments of the hospitality industry. Just all the things that are gone, not forever, but at least for a long, long time, with restaurants and nightclubs and hotels. And my next article, this is going to segue right into that. I want to bring up real quick. So this is from Variety, and this says, don't expect to see concerts before 2022, top touring exec says. Now, I know that might, what's funny is I feel like we were in this window with COVID for a while where people were like, it'll just be a few months and things will go back to normal. We'll just kind of wait it out and it'll go back to normal. There is no more going back to normal. Going back to normal does not exist anymore. I mean, the most interesting part from this article is it says when they're talking to this top executive who deals with live events and concerts and stuff, he says, quote, there is no insurance against COVID currently offered. And even normal insurance policies are pretty scarce and hard to come by. The insurers are sitting on the sideline because there's infinite liability. And, that's the most interesting thing, too, is that we live in such a litigious country. And that really reminds me of, like, when I think about, being a comedian, being someone who for a while made, a portion of his living doing live comedy and being on set as an actor is, the liability factor is so huge now, and it's going to be a long time until, insurers figure out how to deal with that element, how to tackle that. And we can't, the reality of paying people to stay at home, it's just not going to work. Now, listen, I'm not saying that people don't need to get stimulus checks and unemployment to get by. 100%. Absolutely, we need to do that for as long as it takes. I know I just said it's not going to work, but let me just finish my thought here. For a reasonable amount of time, we can't hit this situation where we have like tens of millions of Americans who are just broke and homeless because they lost their jobs. What I'm saying here is that these jobs aren't going to come back. We have to treat it like these jobs are gone forever, hypothetically, because 2022 at the earliest for major Hollywood productions, for live concerts, for events, and we have to figure out, like, I don't know. It's like we have this weird, so we're like at this sort of strange crossroads here, right? Where we have a lot of folks who, they're just so sick of being stuck at home. They feel like they're trapped, they can't do anything, and they're sort of in this like situation where, and I feel this way a lot too. It's like, you know what, man, COVID is COVID. I got to live my life. I'm not just gonna sit at home all day. And then people on the other end that are like, just hyper afraid of the pandemic and the effects of it and all that. And I don't think either one is wrong. I mean, both of those things I think are totally valid. We have to find a way. We have to figure out some sort of healthy middle ground where, those realities can exist together. Because to tell all of these folks who are out of work now, well, it's just the government's got to figure out the unemployment thing and work it out. That's not a sustainable option to get through the future. It's just not going to work. I mean, people need to have. Listen, I think and I talked about this a lot on my last episode, is I think what we have to do, and I'm hoping when it kind of going through, when I was kind of going on and on about, reforming schools and finding new political options, I think we really got to just totally reevaluate how we function in society, how we, I think we're so hyper-focused in the U.S. on career and capitalism and earning and production, and those are good things at their core. It's just when that's all that we focus on, it's when we have these serious problems. And I don't know. I just hope that I hope we figure out a way to kind of create a situation where people, I don't know. I know I'm doing this live, so I'm kind of struggling to have my words as well streamlined as I want them to be. But it's like we just keep passing around like the blame of what's happening now, and there's no good answers anymore. It's almost like everybody's just so angry and frustrated, and we're just so quick to lash out at each other, and we're not figuring out, what is the best way to sort of deal with this, to figure out like what's the options, what are we doing, that's what I think we really got to start focusing on. And I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to end it on that. Or not end the podcast on that. I'm going to end that tangent on that. But I do want to go back to one thing here I thought was interesting. So this is from, what website is this from? This is from Deadslide. I guess it's like one of those like BuzzFeed type things. This is just interesting, I thought. They were sharing 10 things that are gone now from fast casual and fast food restaurants. When we talk about like what's the new normal going to be like, 10 things we're just not going to see anymore. He said pre-cut lemon and limes, self-serve soda fountains, table condiments, sauce dispensers, napkin dispensers, play areas, reusable menus, unwrapped straws, salad bars, and drink refills in the same glassware. And it's the most interesting thing to me are the play areas, right? Where like that was such a huge part of my childhood. I remember like being little and going into those McDonald's playpens. I feel like I hear stories about like what life was like as a kid in the 50s and 60s and stuff, and how for a lot of it, there were things that were just so much more dangerous, like day-to-day things kids did back then that we like are shocked at. And I think that's what's going to be the next thing, is we have this like germophobia because of COVID. And again, I'm not taking away from the validity of COVID and how we have to worry about its effects and all that. But it is everything I've sort of like looked up and seen. It does seem like COVID still is not nearly as deadly as things like the Spanish flu were, or polio was when it was still a problem. And I think, I think it's great that we're taking these precautions. I'm a fan of wearing masks. I'm a fan of social distancing. But I do think, as I was saying before, this is such an effect of what this 24/7 media cycle has done to us, with this like being hyper locked into a nonstop stream of social media has done, where it's just given us this weird, crazy obsession on focusing on these like new. That is why COVID is so scary to people. It's not actually the health effects that it does and it can kill people. It's that we don't have any answers about it. We don't know really how to fight it or how to prevent it, because we know that diabetes and heart disease kill way more people in this country than COVID does. We know way, way, way more people die from the American diet, but we're not scared of it because we basically understand it. Most people who've taken the time to really look into it know that, oh yeah, if you make bad choices with your diet, if you eat unhealthy food, if you smoke a lot, if you drink a lot and you don't exercise, your heart is going to kill you. Diabetes is going to catch up and it's going to kill you. But it's not scary because we understand it, because it's that slow looming death. Whereas COVID, and it also like we can like put logic behind why we get it, how we get it. Again, I know I'm generalizing here. And if you have someone in your family who has passed away from one of those, I'm not taking away from that. I sympathize with that. I'm just simply saying it's interesting that, like, if we really were to look at COVID purely as like how many people it kills compared to the number of people who die from, all the other health ailments that we have, it's not nearly as deadly. But it's because it's new, it's unknown, and we don't know how to fight against it other than like boosting our immune system. And I really put a lot of this blame on ourselves, like us as the American public, for consuming this stuff nonstop. But also, I put a lot of the blame too on this mainstream media cycle that has to hyper focus on COVID. Now, the thing is too, I think the big factor as well is because of the economic fallout. I mean, if people were able, I know this maybe doesn't totally make sense, but if we were able to just live life as normal, and like, let's say COVID wasn't spread by, social interactions from breathing. If it was just a disease that you just got and it wasn't that we had to shut down the economy and everything. I don't think people would have the same reaction. I think if there was a world where we just lived our life and all the same jobs and businesses and stuff were there, the COVID fears wouldn't really be the same thing. And I think really, if we look at how we treat diabetes and heart disease as an example, it kind of proves my point. People know that the way a lot of us live in the U.S. is killing us. I mean, all the refined sugar and saturated fats and lack of exercise, but because it's not talked about nonstop. I mean, think about if CNN and Fox and NPR and all these places did story day after day after day about, what the American diet is doing to kill people, the effects of diabetes day to day. But it's not like sexy and exciting. Maybe sexy isn't the right word, but it's not something that people are, because again, it's like kids don't have to miss school because of diabetes, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying here. I think that makes sense, right? Like, entire economies aren't falling apart because of heart disease and, the American diet. And I think the best way, it's like we're at this stage now. It's like, well, what are we going to do about it? What's next? What are we going to do? How are we going to get past this? I don't know. I mean, I understand. I understand that it might be too dangerous to send kids back to school in the fall. The teachers don't feel safe. I don't take that lightly. I understand that there are major things at play here that we have to embrace to deal with COVID. But again, a lot of this feels like we're just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. And like, what are we going to do? Like, shelter in place forever? We don't have any vaccine options. They're not coming anytime soon. And we know, even when we have one, there's a bunch of idiots who think they're going to get microchipped and they're not going to take the vaccine. So I don't know. I'm trying to be more positive outlook, but I think I'm starting to become of the mind where we just got to embrace this COVID thing. If you have a compromised immune system, we need to set up a system where you don't have to go out in public, where you can stay at home and get your needs. But I'm starting to feel more and more like, we just got to say screw it and just open back up and wear a mask, distance when you can, and just get back to living life. I don't know. It just seems, it just almost feels like insane not to. But anyway, I wanted to jump into one last thing here. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was, I want to talk about the Epstein thing a bit. So there was a federal judge now I'm going to preface by saying I don't do a lot of conspiracy theory stuff on this podcast. It's not really my style. It's not really my take. I don't like to do a lot of conspiracy theory talk, but I do want to jump into this. There's a federal judge in New Jersey who was assigned, my understanding was, she was assigned to oversee the case against Deutsche Bank. I believe that was the bank that handled a lot of Epstein's transactions, right? And there's a lawsuit from different Deutsche Bank investors or shareholders or something in that wheelhouse. And they were suing. They're bringing a lawsuit against the bank for basically because the bank was knowingly involved with Epstein, and Epstein's obviously a scumbag and a crook. And I'm paraphrasing here, but you get what I'm kind of getting at here, right? Okay, so that judge in New Jersey is assigned to this case, to oversee this case. 4 days after this, a hitman, this is all according to various news sites, and still they're kind of gathering information, but a hitman disguised as a FedEx delivery driver shows up at this judge's house. Her son opens the door, kills the son instantly, shoots her husband, almost kills him, takes off. The judge was in the basement, so I guess she wasn't hit. And then yesterday or 2 days ago, I believe it was 2 days ago now, the alleged shooter dies mysteriously from a suicide and self-inflicted gunshot wound. They claim that this shooter was an attorney himself who was a men's rights activist. Now, I haven't had time to look into the nuances of the backstory of this particular gentleman and his interactions with this judge, but everything about this feels super, super suspicious. That this, attorney in a fit of rage decided to, and I got to look into what that means specifically, a men's rights activist. I suppose he was an attorney who argued on behalf of men in paternity court and family court and stuff. I don't know. But super, super weird. Like, the timing is just too ridiculously strange, right? That the most insane high-profile case in recent time, in my lifetime for sure, with Jeffrey Epstein and his associations with the Clintons and Trump and Prince Andrew and all these other people we don't even know about, right? So Ghislaine, whatever her name is, the woman, Maxwell, who is his number two, she's in custody. And now his bank that he was using has suit brought against them. They're about to go to court. And the judge who's overseeing this case has her family executed mysteriously by this random other attorney, and then he just kills himself. Just things don't add up, man. It's way too, I don't know. Again, I'm gonna take some time here to do some research and figure out what the heck is going on. But this just doesn't make any sense, and it's really again, I don't want to go full conspiracy theory about this judge, her family being whacked, but it's just too much of a coincidence. And this is gonna be a reoccurring thing I'm gonna talk about in the show. I'm gonna do a lot of research, but just the fact that this random attorney, even if he had beef with this judge, the fact that he would just disguise himself as a FedEx delivery driver, go to her house, kill her son and husband, or attempt to kill her husband, it just doesn't make sense. And I really I know whatever her name is, Maxwell, has claimed that she has video footage of major political leaders engaging in sexual acts with minors, and that and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the exact article in front of me, the exact quotes, but I will say, if there's one thing I think all of us in the country are fed up with, it's just high-level corruption going unchecked. And it's just very suspicious that this case is being brought to light, and then all of a sudden this judge's family gets whacked, and it's is it trying to silence people? Was it a fringe person? I don't know. So I'm I'm planning to do a little bit more research on the nuances of the people involved in this and try and have more facts for you guys. But again, if anybody's just tuning in, I'm going to wrap this up soon. So this is my solo podcast, Thin the Herd, as I said, where I do a little bit of news, a little bit of commentary. A lot of it's kind of stream of consciousness stuff, and just kind of taking a look at what's going on in the world. I'm going to have some episodes where I have some guests come in live, some guests Skype in, Zoom in. But yeah, I appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to do another episode maybe tomorrow morning or Thursday. We'll see how my schedule goes. And yeah, I'm going to